Hi, I'm Sarah Piccini. I'm the Assistant Director of the Lackawanna Historical Society here in Scranton. We're headquartered in the George Catlin Memorial House. Our entire house serves as a museum and a research library. Today, I'd like to show you some of the items in our collection. This was originally the dining room in the Catlin's home. Today, it is basically our inbox. We have a collections committee that assesses any items that we take in for donations. Our mission is to collect and document anything relating to the history of Lackawanna County. So as we continue moving forward, we're continuing to always take in new items to help us present that story. This month, we're looking at everything from tools from a local watchmaker to a game about Scranton, kind of like the game of life, to some of our favorite things that are coat check tickets from a local theater, a local movie theater in Scranton. One of the most popular stories in Scranton today is Joe Biden. Scranton is the birthplace of our newest president, Joe Biden. So one of our new things that we're accepting into the collection are a lot of materials relating to Biden's time in Scranton and then his campaign for president. The former director of the Scranton Chamber of Commerce, Austin Burke, is also a local artist who does a lot of local scenes. He has a series of paintings and postcards of Biden's former home on Washington Avenue. And then we also received from the Scranton campaign office a whole bunch of Biden campaign materials, from postcards to hand sanitizer and stickers and yard signs and pins, anything else relating to the history of the campaign that will become part of our collection here. Part of the collection of the Historical Society is a research library relating to the history of Lackawanna County, the history of coal mining, the history of immigration, anything relating to the area. We're always looking for additional copies of books we might have. This is The History of Lackawanna County by Thomas Murphy. It was written in the 1940s or 50s. There are several books that we use all the time, so we're always looking for extra copies to help us get over them when they're when we've torn them to pieces from reading them to ragged shreds. So we're always looking for more. There's a greater volume in our library. We'll go back there a little bit later so you can see more of what we have in our collection. Part of our collection also includes fashion and uniforms. These items are from a gentleman named Matt Beckage, who passed away recently. His daughter is donating everything that pertained to the story of his life in uniforms, from his Knights of Columbus uniform to scouting uniforms, both as a child and an adult leader. There are military uniforms from his time in the Army, a Lions Club jacket. So it's kind of a story of a life in clothing. It's a more unique way, more tangible way to tell a story. So we're happy to add these into our collection as well. One of my favorite parts of our collection is our fashion collection. Most of what we have are the fancier pieces. We have cocktail dresses and wedding dresses, some uniforms, but generally the things that were worn every day, work clothes, practical clothes, things you would wear just on a regular basis, were usually worn out and then thrown away. The pieces that we have are the pieces that were saved and treasured over the years. This dress next to me is the wedding dress of Jane Scranton Fuller, worn in her 1886 wedding. She would have been a younger woman, maybe 18 or 20 years old, and heavily corseted at the time to make her fit into this itty-bitty waist. Jane was the daughter of city founders, the Scranton family. The dress itself is an ivory satin with artificial hydrangeas draped across the front and a full train. The dress behind me was worn by a mother and daughter, actually. It was originally worn in 1907 by Marion Marjorie Warren Scranton, and then worn later by her daughter Marion in 1932. When Marion wore it in the 30s, the dress would have been remodeled and redesigned a little bit to make it fit more into the style of the time, rather than her mother's. Her mother would have worn it with presumably a much higher collar, and the style was changed and remodeled to fit the style of the 30s. Here in the formal living room in the house, we have the portraits of the men who gave Scranton its name. In the 1840s, a gentleman by the name of William Henry came to town hoping to start an ironworks. Henry had little experience as an ironmonger himself, so he brought in his son-in-law, Selden Scranton, and Selden's brother George in 1840 to start the ironworks on what is now Cedar Avenue. Within 10 years, they turned Scranton into an industrial boomtown. They mined anthracite coal, they produced railroad T-rail, and they built their own railroad. They became later the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western. George and Selden, later called in 1847, later brought in their cousin, Joseph Hand Scranton, who had been a merchant in Georgia, to help them expand and improve their iron-making enterprise. It was actually Joseph Hand who had the idea to start creating railroad T-rail that they sold to the Erie Railroad and then later used for their own tracking purposes for the DL&W. Joseph Hand is the one who stayed the longest in Scranton, had the biggest impact on the town. He's the one who built what we call the Scranton Estate. It's today part of the University of Scranton. And actually from where his portrait hangs over the fireplace in our living room, he could see his former house across the street. It's part of the University of Scranton today. It functions as their admissions building. Here in George Catlin's former library, we have some of the items from our collection pulled out to show you a little bit more in detail some of the pieces that we have in our collection. The collection includes everything from maps to photos, and even a rock, just in case. It's one of our favorite pieces that tells the story of the natural history of Lackawanna County. The maps are one of my favorite parts of the collection. They're an excellent way to illustrate what the city looked like and how it's changed over time. Some of the best resources that we have are Sanborn insurance maps. They were done as resources for a fire insurance company. And the maps are drawn in different colors so you know what the buildings are made of. We also have a collection of atlas maps that list the property owners and the businesses in each little square on the map. They're a great visual representation of what the city looked like. The one that I have out today is from 1918. The pages that it's open to are what's around Courthouse Square and the heart of downtown Scranton. Historically, at the time in 1918, it would have been the heart of the city's wholesale district, its theater district, shops and restaurants. It was a very busy, bustling area. You get a great sense of that from the map. Everything is just jam-packed in a very, very small space, and it gives you a great idea of what it would have been like to walk around Scranton at that time. When it was busy and bustling, and there were people and businesses and just so much going on in such a small space. Since Scranton was such a busy industrial town, men worked in the coal mines, women worked in the textile and garment industries. They often didn't really have time to go to school or have a complete education. So one of the things that was developed in Scranton in the 1890s was the International Correspondence Schools, started by a gentleman named Thomas Foster, who was originally doing courses to help men become certified miners from the state. Later in the decade, in 1917, ICS started the Women's Institute of Domestic Arts and Sciences. Led by Mary Brooks Picken, it was designed to teach women dressmaking and millinery and cooking. The basic part of their coursework was drafting and pattern making. They were all in booklets like this. There were probably 60 or 70 different versions of them, teaching different skills. From basic dressmaking, how to lay out a pattern, how to read a pattern, how to follow one to create clothing. Part of it later went on to teach the finer points of clothing from different kinds of trims and seams, more tailored pieces, but they also taught things like what kind of colors went together, how to tell if a woman was warm or cool, if you look better in blues or in golds and oranges. Part of the collection that we have is the coursework from a woman who attended ICS. We have her notebook that includes the fabric samples that she got to complete individual projects. One of the best parts about the Women's Institute, however, was that they taught skills beyond just the dressmaking and the millinery. Part of their courses included how to open your own dressmaker and tailor shop, or how to open your millinery shop. In the time, in the 19-teens, 1920s, it was kind of a revolutionary idea that a woman would support herself. So the shop ownership portions of the classes taught everything from how to create your own business cards, how to interact with customers, how to advertise, how to become the a la mode dressmaker of the day at the time. And it was kind of a neat thing. It was sort of a bold move still to teach women how to be self-sufficient. Gave them the basic skills to have a craft or a skill, and then how to use that for their own advancement to support themselves. This is one of our newer exhibits. It's done in honor of Nancy Farkas, who's the wife of one of our former board members, talking about the history of music in Lackawanna County. There's a long-standing story that if you could play Scranton, you could play anywhere. Scranton had a booming history in the late 1800s, early 1900s of theaters and music halls and vaudeville shows. The theory was that coal miners didn't make much money, so if they were coming to your show and giving you their hard-earned nickel or quarter or whatever it was, you better entertain them. You better give them your money's worth. So if you could play in Scranton, your show would be successful anywhere else. If you could satisfy coal miners, you would satisfy broader audiences anywhere else. The exhibit that we have focuses a lot on early bands in Scranton. There were a lot of parades for almost any reason. There are amusement parks that had their own band. Luna Park had Bowers Band that played in pavilions and dance halls. There were also ethnic groups that were heavily involved in music, primarily the Welsh. The Welsh have a tradition of eisteddfods that are singing and poetry competitions. There were Welsh singing groups from Scranton that performed nationally and internationally. Scranton also has later claims to fame. Early Scranton native Ned Washington won an Oscar in 1941 for writing When You Wish Upon a Star for Pinocchio, and also The Hokey Pokey was written in Scranton. So next time you're at a wedding or anywhere with children doing the Hokey Pokey and you put your right hand in, please think of us. Our research library is one of the most important resources that we have in the Catlin House. We work with genealogists, we work with scholars near and far to document anything about the history of Lackawanna County and the broader history of coal mining or of immigration. The collection includes several bound copies of maps that document the region from 1870 through about the 1970s or so. And then the rest of our collection gets a little more into the nitty-gritty. We have city directories that list everyone who lived in Scranton from 1859 through the present day. We have copies of anthracite mine inspectors' reports that list miners who were killed in accidents. They're a great resource for genealogists. We have a genealogy collection that has bound volumes of family genealogies. So if you have early ancestors in the region, we may be able to find something to help you trace your ancestry back in time in Scranton. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed your sneak peek of some of the pieces that we have in the Historical Society's collection. We work a lot with researchers and genealogists and donors from all over the country, all over the world. If you find anything in your family's collections in your attic that has any connection to Lackawanna County, please let us know. It may be something that we don't have that we would be happy to have to help us tell our stories a little bit better. If you're looking for further resources about Scranton or Lackawanna County or coal mining or any other topics that we talk a lot about that are near and dear to our hearts, we do have a bookstore here at the Catlin House. You can find more information on our website at www.lackawannahistory.org, or you can visit our Facebook page for the Lackawanna Historical Society to see other pieces of our collection that are highlighted or gain more information about the region.